Hey class, happy snow day. So unfortunately, this is the last class before our final exams. So I'm going to go over some of the slides from what would have been today's class, just so that you make sure that you have a little bit of a grasp on the material going into the final exam. I've also posted a final exam study guide because we won't be meeting today, so I wouldn't have had the chance to talk to you about what to study or what to focus on. So if you look in Blackboard, you'll see that, actually I've got it open right here, you'll see that under course information, we've got the final exam review guide. And then I'll post today's class, which I'm going to go over with you right now really quickly. I will post that also to the Blackboard so that you'll have all of the slides. And if you have any questions at all about this stuff or about the exam, please don't hesitate to email me. I will be available, all day, every day. And so we will address any questions that you might have as they come up. Sorry that this is the way that we're going to have to do this one, but hopefully it's all right. So we were going to do PSA sharing today, but I'll just allow you guys to do that yourselves. So we'll talk, today's class was supposed to be about medicalization and sexual problems and solutions. And so this is the DSM classification, which our DSM stands for the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's what psychiatrists use when they're diagnosing people. And it's unfortunately based on what's called the Masters and Johnson linear male-based model of sexual response. It's actually just called the Masters and Johnson model of sexual response, but the reason that it's highly criticized is because it's linear, which means that one thing goes after the other. So you can see here, excitement comes before plateau, which comes before orgasm, which comes before resolution. We learned about this when we were talking about sexual desire and sexual response. So you may remember this from that. Now, I do want for your exam for you to remember what the criticisms are of this model. So we'll talk first briefly about women's sexual problems. I'm really only going to focus, when I go through these slides, I'm only going to focus for you on the things that will be relevant for the exam. This is just the DSM with how they define female sexual dysfunction. These are the desire problems and arousal problems that occur. Some of the weaknesses of these are that they really focus just on the physical. They kind of ignore the relational or situational factors that might contribute to arousal. Then this is the orgasm problem that's in the DSM. Again, it really focuses on that physical outlet. In terms of pain problems, there are two different pain problems. But what we're finding with all of this in terms of the DSM and how they're classifying sexual problems is that there's more is necessary. There's a real lack of inclusion of a lot of factors that might contribute to sexual dysfunction or sexual problems. And women's sexuality is really highly contextual. So you can imagine how maybe relationship dynamics might play just as much of a role as something else. Or if you're really stressed at work, you're probably not going to respond very positively sexually. And so it might be important to consider those things. This is a post secret of the day. Okay, the etiology of sexual problems. This is something that I want you guys to understand. So the etiology is just a fancy scientific word for the cause or origin of the problem. So it's where the issues began, where they came from. And there are predisposing factors, precipitating factors, and perpetuating factors. There is a question about this on the exam. So predisposing factors, they typically begin in early development. So this is things like how you were raised, or whether you've had any sexual abuse that may have occurred, or your age of puberty, or your age of first intercourse. And then precipitating factors are things that may bring about the problems. So they may be things like something really negative happens, and from that point forward, that was the sort of precipitating factor. And then perpetuating factors are things that contribute to the current functioning and may continue to feed into the sexual problem. So maybe an inability to orgasm has now made a woman have performance anxiety because she wants her partner to feel competent, but that anxiety is actually what's perpetuating the lack of orgasm. So these are things that contribute to your current functioning. So that negative feedback loop is what we call that anxiety, that negative feedback loop of anxiety is what's perpetuating the lack of orgasm. So that's predisposing factors, precipitating factors, and perpetuating factors. Now, another important part of the etiology of sexual problems are whether they are organic, psychogenic, or mixed, and sometimes they're unknown. So typically what would happen is a clinician would say something like, okay, these factors are both, it's due to a predisposing factor of sexual abuse, and now it's of mixed origin, or it's of psychogenic origin. So what each of these mean are organic is when you have some sort of a physiological issue. So there's actually a neurochemical problem there, or a neurological problem. This could be, so an organic, severe chronic depression is of organic etiology, for example, because it's a problem with neurotransmitters in the brain. And so something like, for example, sometimes women or men have sexual desire problems that are based on this organic etiology because they have this severe chronic depression. And then that feeds into a sexual desire problem. Now, there's also psychogenic, and that's when it's a psychological origin. So say, for example, growing up, you were always told that sex is dirty, sex is bad, and then as an adult, when you're in a loving relationship, you then become unable to dissociate sex with those things. And that would be something that's a psychogenic origin, or it's psychological. A lot of the time it's a mixed origin, and that's a combination of organic and psychogenic. And then sometimes, and this actually happens more often than one might think, it's of an unknown origin, and it takes some time to figure out what that might be, and sometimes it's not even ever really known. So these two slides, knowing what the predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating factors are, and the organic, psychogenic, mixed, or unknown etiologies, those are important to understand. If you have questions about them, please let me know. Okay, so here's some examples for each of those. So once you go through these slides, you'll see that we have some examples for each of the different ones so that you can begin to learn it on your own. As I said, I'm not going to go through each of these with you, but please let me know if you have any questions. So this is another one. So medicalization is important for you to understand. I encourage you to watch both of these YouTube clips, and then you can understand what medicalization is exactly. Within women's sexual functioning, we see a lot of medicalization happening right now due to the success of Viagra. So Viagra from men, obviously, I'm sure all of you know what that is. The success of that for the pharmaceutical industry has prompted a search for a women's pill so that women can have the same sort of benefits of pharmaceutical intervention. Your reading for today, that will also be addressed on the exam, talks a lot about medicalization, and your supplemental reading, the one that's the extra reading that you have, it talks a lot about medicalization. It's actually a really interesting short read, so I encourage you to check it out. Also, it will be addressed on your exam, but check out these video clips and let me know if you have any questions of this medicalization. So what happens with medicalization is that the pharmaceutical industry works with other partners, interested parties, and almost invents a disease so that there needs to then be a pharmaceutical cure. And this is definitely a problem within sexual desire. Some people argue that desire problems are not at all able to be treated by medication. I'm more on that side than I am on the side of medical treatments being viable, but I'm also open. So I don't know. It's an interesting situation, what's going on with women's sexual health right now in terms of medicalization. So check that out. The context, we talked a little bit about that. I encourage you to read through all of this. Again, I'm not gonna, you won't listen to this if it's too long. So another post secret of the day. So now with men's sexual problems, we see the same thing with, here's all the problems. We see the same thing when it comes to etiology. Oh, I want you to remember there happens to be a question on the exam about these other disorders. So I encourage you to, Peyronie's disease is the development of, it's often caused by injury to the penis, and it occurs primarily in older men, usually for no apparent reason, and it can be pretty painful. The Peyronie's disease causes a curvature in the penis that may inhibit erections or intercourse, and it's just a development of calcium deposits and fibrous tissue in the penis. And then priapism is, this occurs when blood's unable to drain from the penis several hours to a few days. It's not associated with sexual acts or thoughts, activities or thoughts. It's sort of similar to women's persistent genital arousal syndrome, and a priapism can occur if you take too much Viagra as well. So understand what Peyronie's disease and priapism is. So the etiology, as I said, with men is the same as women, so we still have these same predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating factors. And here's some of the components there. I encourage you to check out these Viagra clips. They're pretty funny. I love teaching this class just because they are pretty entertaining. So I encourage you to check out those YouTube links. Here's a couple of commercials with the media attention that has come out of Viagra. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. Little light switch. Some more ads. And there has been some attention brought to the impact that Viagra has had on men, but also their female partners, and how you can see, this woman is standing behind him saying, when he's asking for a prescription to diet Viagra, saying absolutely not. Yeah, so we would have had a discussion here, but the snow is prohibiting us to, and we would have done a reflection here. So I also want you guys to know a little bit about the difference between a sex educator and a counselor and a therapist. So sex educator does an informal counseling of learners. They educate, they don't treat. So there's no treatment course. A sexual counselor identifies the problems and then discusses potential solutions, whereas the sex therapist takes it one step further and actually implements these solutions. So I need you to know for the exam the difference between those three. Within this class, you would be obviously taking the role of the sexuality educator, and that's also what my role is in this class, as a sexuality educator. So the difference between them, this is something you should know, that counselors can help you identify a problem or concern and give you information or provide a referral, whereas therapists can actually provide a more intensive and comprehensive or longer-term support for the individual. If you want more, here's a website that talks a lot about, it's the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and it's an interesting website with a lot of resources on it. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions about this stuff, and check out the exam review online. Any of you who haven't yet passed the exit exam, you will have to take the exit exam either tomorrow at the office, or you'll have to take it in class after the final exam on Wednesday. We would have done evaluations today, but we're going to have to hold those off for Wednesday, so we'll probably start the class with course evaluations, and then you guys will take your final exam. And please don't hesitate to ask me any questions. I will be available. So I hope you guys enjoy this little long weekend you've been granted, and I will talk to you all soon. See you Wednesday. Good luck studying.